The courtroom was packed. Everyone's eyes were glued to the front where a man sat, his head lowered, his face pale with worry. His life, his freedom depended on the next few minutes. The judge's gavel was about to strike when suddenly a tiny voice echoed across the silent room. "Excuse me, Your Honor. I'm my dad's lawyer," gasps filled the air. Every single head in the courtroom turned. A little girl, no more than 9 years old, stood there with trembling hands but fire in her eyes. No one knew what was about to happen, but everyone knew. This moment would change everything. Her father, David, had been fighting a case that seemed impossible to win. Accused of something he didn't do, he had lost almost everything. Money was gone. His real lawyer had walked out just days earlier. And now, with no defense, David sat alone, waiting for the judge's final word, but his daughter Emily refused to stay silent. She had been sitting quietly in the back row, clutching her worn-out notebook, listening carefully to every word. And when she saw the judge raise his gavel, she couldn't hold back any longer. The judge squinted through his glasses. "Young lady, this is not a place for games. Sit down immediately." But Emily's voice didn't shake. "No, Your Honor, my dad is innocent. And if nobody will speak for him, then I will." The crowd erupted in whispers. Some laughed, others shook their heads. A child as a lawyer? Impossible. Yet there was something about her tone, a mix of innocence and courage, that silenced even the loudest critics. Emily remembered the nights she sat by her dad's side, watching him go through papers, muttering words like justice, truth, and fairness. She remembered him telling her bedtime stories not about princesses, but about honesty and doing the right thing, even when it was hard. And now, as he sat broken and hopeless, she couldn't let the world crush him, not when she still had a voice. The prosecutor smirked. "Your Honor, this is absurd. A child can't defend a case. This is nothing but a distraction." But before the judge could respond, Emily stepped closer. She opened her notebook, hands shaking but determination blazing. "You say my dad is guilty because of papers and words? But I know the truth because I live with him. I've seen his kindness. I've seen him help people even when he had nothing left. I've seen him cry at night because he didn't know how to protect me from all this." Her small voice cracked. The entire courtroom went still. The judge leaned forward. For the first time, his stern face softened just a little. "Go on," he said quietly. Emily took a deep breath. "If this court is really about truth, then listen to me. Because I'm not lying. And I'm not scared. My dad is a good man." At that moment, even the prosecutor's smile faded. Reporters in the room scribbled furiously. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Something unbelievable was happening, a courtroom built on logic and law was being shaken by the raw honesty of a child. Just when everyone thought the judge would dismiss her words as a child's outburst, he raised his hand to silence the room. His gavel stayed in the air. Then he looked straight at Emily and said, "If you truly want to defend your father, I will give you 5 minutes. But remember, young lady, this is a court of law. Every word counts." The room exploded, gasps, murmurs, cameras flashing. A little girl given the chance to stand as her father's lawyer. Nobody knew what Emily would say next, but one thing was certain. The truth was about to break free. The courtroom buzzed with disbelief. Journalists whispered furiously, pens scratching against notepads. Cameras clicked as the young girl, Emily, slowly walked toward the wooden podium where lawyers usually stood. Her little feet tapped softly against the cold marble floor, but to her father, David, it sounded like thunder every step she took. Echoed his shame and his hope all at once. The judge cleared his throat. "Young lady, you have exactly 5 minutes. Use them wisely." The prosecutor chuckled under his breath, leaning back with folded arms, certain this would be a spectacle and nothing more. But Emily gripped the edges of the podium with both hands, lifted her chin, and began to speak. "Your Honor," she said, her voice small but steady, "I don't have a fancy degree. I don't know all the big words lawyers use. But I know something stronger. I know the truth." The audience hushed. "My dad? He's not perfect. He burns toast. He forgets to put his socks in the laundry. He works too hard and sometimes falls asleep on the couch with papers in his lap, but guilty? Her eyes darted toward the prosecutor. No, never guilty. A ripple of laughter swept across the courtroom, not mocking but almost charmed. Even the bailiff cracked a smile. David's eyes filled with tears. He wanted to tell her to sit down, to not carry the weight of his battle. But his throat was locked tight, his voice trapped inside his chest. All he could do was watch, heart pounding, as his little girl stood taller than he ever had. Emily flipped open her small notebook. The crowd leaned forward. I kept track, she said. Every night when Dad came home late, he told me why. And I wrote it down. Here, she pointed at scribbles of dates and short notes written in a child's handwriting. On the night they said he did something bad, he wasn't even there, he was with me. We made pancakes for dinner. Gasps filled the room. Reporters scribbled faster. The judge raised his eyebrows. The prosecutor sat forward, his smirk gone. This is ridiculous. The prosecutor barked, rising to his feet. We can't take the word of a child over official evidence. Emily turned, her braids swinging gently. But isn't that what evidence is? Proof of the truth? I may be a kid, but I remember every second of that night. My dad was at home, with me. You can check the store cameras near our house we bought. Pancake mixed together that evening. The courtroom broke into chaos, gasps, whispers, and stunned silence. For the first time, the prosecutor looked rattled. Order! The judge's gavel slammed down. Order in this court. He leaned forward, his face unreadable. Emily, are you certain of what you're saying? Remember, this is a court of law. Emily didn't flinch. She looked him straight in the eye. I'm not just certain, Your Honor. I'm swearing on my dad's love for me. He has never lied to me, and I will not lie to you. The room fell deathly silent. David buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed. He couldn't believe what was happening. His little girl had done what professional lawyers couldn't. She had shaken the entire foundation of the case. The judge leaned back, stroking his chin thoughtfully. Very well. Bailiff, make arrangements to retrieve the security footage from the store this young lady mentioned. The prosecutor's face turned pale, but Emily wasn't finished. She flipped another page in her notebook. And one more thing, her voice trembled, but she held firm. People say my dad doesn't care about rules, but I know the truth. When I had a fever, he stayed up all night making sure I was okay. When I cried because kids at school were mean, he told me the world can be unfair, but that I should always choose kindness anyway. That's who he is. That's the man you're calling guilty. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. If you punish him, you punish me too, because he's not just my dad, he's my hero. The entire courtroom fell silent. Not even the ticking of the clock was heard. The judge closed his eyes for a long moment, then opened them, staring at Emily with something that looked almost like respect. 5 minutes are up, he said firmly. But what you've said cannot be ignored. He turned toward the prosecutor. This court will reconvene tomorrow morning, and I expect the footage from that store to be ready. The gavel struck. David looked at his daughter, speechless, tears running freely down his face. Emily climbed down from the podium and walked back to him, slipping her tiny hand into his trembling one. For the first time in months, there was hope, but no one knew what that footage would reveal or how far some people might go to keep the truth buried. The real battle had only just begun. The next morning, the courtroom was overflowing. Word had spread overnight like wildfire. A little girl had stood up to defend her father, and the judge had actually listened. Reporters filled the benches, cameras flashed, and curious spectators whispered nervously as they waited for the gavel to strike. David sat at the defense table, his hands clasped tightly, eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. Beside him, Emily clutched her notebook, her face pale but determined. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. His voice echoed, "This court is now in session. Let us proceed with the evidence requested yesterday." Before the bailiff could even present the footage, the prosecutor shot to his feet. His tone was sharp, almost desperate. "Your Honor, this is absurd." Allowing a child's testimony to dictate proceedings undermines the very credibility of this court. Children are impressionable, emotional, and easily mistaken. He pointed directly at Emily. She may believe what she says, but belief is not proof. The audience stirred, some nodding, others frowning, but Emily stood up, raising her little notebook like a shield. "I may be small," she said, her voice steady, "but truth doesn't depend on size." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. "Enough," the judge said firmly. "Bailiff, play the footage." The lights dimmed slightly as a screen was wheeled. Into place, the video began to roll, grainy but clear enough. It showed David entering the grocery store, Emily by his side, holding his hand. Together they picked up pancake mix, eggs, and syrup. The timestamp flashed clearly, the very night of the crime. Murmurs spread like wildfire. David covered his mouth in disbelief. Emily gripped his arm tightly, eyes shining. But the prosecutor wasn't finished. His voice rose above the whispers. "This proves nothing. He could have left afterward. He could have still committed the crime later that night. We cannot simply let emotion override hard facts." The judge narrowed his eyes. "And what hard facts do you have, counselor?" The prosecutor's face flushed. He shuffled through his papers, pulling out documents. "Witnesses, reports, circumstantial evidence." Emily took a step forward. "But not the truth, not what really happened." The judge tilted his head. "Young lady, I'll allow you to ask one question, just one." The room erupted in murmurs. A child allowed to cross-examine? Unheard of. Emily clutched her notebook tightly, thinking hard. Then, with surprising calm, she looked at the prosecutor. "You said my dad could have gone out after we made pancakes, right?" "Yes," the prosecutor snapped. "Then why," Emily asked softly, "does the neighbor's security camera show our lights on all night? Why does the timestamp show my dad never left the house?" The courtroom exploded. The prosecutor froze. Reporters leapt to their feet, scribbling furiously. Even the judge leaned forward, stunned. David's eyes brimmed with tears. He whispered, "Emily, how did you—" She turned to him with a small smile. "I asked Mrs. Henderson next door if she had her camera running that night. She gave me the tape." The crowd gasped. Emily had done her own investigation. The prosecutor stammered, "This is outrageous." This can't be admissible," but the judge raised his hand. "Silence. This court has reason to believe crucial evidence was overlooked or deliberately ignored." His glare pierced the prosecutor, who shrank under the weight. Of it, the judge turned to the bailiff. "Retrieve that neighbor's footage immediately. If it confirms what this child has said, then this case takes a very different turn." The bailiff nodded and hurried out. Emily returned to her father's side, her small hand slipping into his trembling one. The entire courtroom buzzed, torn between disbelief and admiration. For the first time, David felt the crushing weight on his shoulders lift, just a little. His daughter had outsmarted trained lawyers. She had found what everyone else had missed, but as the crowd settled, David noticed something the others didn't. The prosecutor's face wasn't just angry, it was afraid. His eyes darted toward the exit, his jaw clenched. David's heart pounded. What is he hiding? The judge's voice rang out once more. "This court will resume in 1 hour when the new evidence is presented. Until then, recess." The gavel slammed. David leaned down to hug Emily, whispering, "You saved me, sweetheart. You've done more than I ever could." But Emily, wise beyond her years, whispered back, "It's not over, Dad. He's scared. And scared people do dangerous things." David froze, staring at the prosecutor across the room. For the first time, he realized this fight wasn't just about proving innocence anymore. Someone out there wanted him silenced, and the next hour could change everything. The courtroom reconvened. After the recess, every seat was taken, the air heavy with tension. The buzz of whispers stopped the instant the judge entered, his robe flowing behind him. "Bring in the new evidence," he ordered. The bailiff stepped forward, carrying a small flash drive. He plugged it into the court screen. Within seconds, the video flickered to life, the grainy black and white footage from the neighbor's security. Camera appeared David's living room. The timestamp matched the night of the crime. There was David, sitting with Emily, laughing as they flipped pancakes onto plates. Later, he was seen dozing off on the couch while Emily curled up beside him with a blanket. Hours passed. David never left. The courtroom erupted. The prosecutor shot to his feet, face red. This can't be right. It's been tampered with. Someone has altered the footage. The judge's eyes narrowed dangerously. Are you suggesting this court's bailiff tampered with evidence? The prosecutor stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. No, Your Honor, but Emily suddenly spoke, her small voice slicing through the chaos. Why are you so afraid of the truth? The crowd gasped. David studied the prosecutor carefully. There was more here than just a weak case. The man's eyes darted left and right, his hands trembling. Something deeper was hiding beneath his arguments. Emily tugged on her father's sleeve. Dad, she whispered, I think he knows you're innocent. He just doesn't want the court to believe it. David's stomach sank. His daughter was right, but why? The judge slammed his gavel. Enough games. This footage clearly establishes an alibi. Mr. David could not have committed the crime. So tell me, prosecutor, why was this critical evidence never presented before this court? The prosecutor's mouth opened, but no words came out. His silence was louder than any argument. Suddenly, a woman in the back of the courtroom stood up. She was nervous, wringing her hands, but her voice carried strong. Your Honor, I work in the prosecutor's office. I need to tell the truth. The room froze. She swallowed hard. This evidence, the store footage, the neighbor's camera, it was submitted weeks ago, but it was removed from the files. By him, she pointed. Directly at the prosecutor, gasps filled the room. Reporters nearly dropped their pens. Cameras flashed like lightning. The prosecutor turned pale as chalk. The judge's face darkened. Is this true? Did you deliberately suppress evidence? The prosecutor slammed his fists on the table. This man is guilty. He has to be. If the court won't see it, then he stopped himself. Realizing too late what he had just admitted, Emily whispered, He doesn't care about justice. He just wanted to win. David's fists clenched, his anger boiling. All these months of pain, of humiliation, of being called a criminal because of one man's greed. The judge stood, towering over the courtroom. His voice thundered, This is a court of law, not a stage for ambition. You have not only failed your duty, you have disgraced it. He turned to the bailiff. Take him into custody, effective immediately. The prosecutor shouted in protest, but his words were drowned by the clanking of handcuffs as two officers dragged him away. The courtroom buzzed with outrage and astonishment. Silence fell again as the judge turned to David. His expression softened. Just slightly, Mr. David, he said firmly, based on the overwhelming evidence presented, the store footage, the neighbor's security camera, and the testimony of your daughter, it is the judgment of this court that you are innocent of all charges. David gasped, his knees nearly giving out. Emily threw her arms around him, her tiny voice trembling with joy. I told you, Dad. I told you the truth would win. The courtroom erupted in applause. Reporters rushed to capture every detail, shouting questions, cameras flashing nonstop. Strangers wiped tears from their eyes at the sight of a little girl who had moved mountains with her courage. As the gavel came down, signaling freedom, David finally allowed himself to breathe again. He hugged Emily tighter than ever before, but then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a man in a dark suit slip quietly out of the courtroom. Unlike the others, he wasn't clapping or smiling. He simply glanced back once, his expression cold, before disappearing into the hallway. David's heart skipped a beat. Something about that man felt wrong. Emily noticed it too. Dad, she whispered, did you see him? David nodded slowly, his stomach tightening again. The trial might be over. But something far bigger had just begun. The courtroom had grown, so tense that you could hear the smallest sigh echo against the wooden walls. Everyone was glued to the little girl standing just beside her father, her tiny hands clutching the edge of the table, as though it was her anchor in the storm. The judge cleared his throat and leaned forward. His voice, heavy with years of experience, cut through the silence. Child, do you understand the seriousness of what you're claiming? The girl raised her head. Her eyes weren't fearful, now they were sharp, clear, and unshaken. Yes, Your Honor, she said softly but firmly. I told you, I'm my dad's lawyer, and I can prove he's innocent. A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. The prosecutor, visibly irritated, slammed a folder down on the desk. This is outrageous, he barked. This child is not on the bar, not a certified lawyer, and has no standing in this case. We cannot allow this. Circus to continue. But before the judge could respond, the little girl slid a folded paper from her small backpack. Her voice shook for a moment, but she steadied it with determination. My father taught me that truth doesn't need a license, it needs courage. And if you read this, you'll see that everything they're saying about him is a lie. The judge gestured for the bailiff to bring the paper. Everyone watched in astonished silence as the document made its way to the bench. The judge unfolded it slowly. His eyes scanned the lines. At first, his face remained neutral, but then his brow furrowed, his lips pressed tightly together. And finally, his expression shifted into something no one expected. Shock. What is this? The judge asked, lifting the paper high for the courtroom to see. The girl swallowed. Her voice was small, but it carried. That's the original contract my dad signed, the one they tried to hide. It proves he didn't steal anything. It proves they framed him. The prosecutor jumped to his feet, red-faced. This is fabricated. It can't be authentic. He shouted, his voice cracking under pressure, but the girl wasn't done. She reached back into her bag and pulled out something else, a flash drive. She held it up for everyone to see. This has the emails. The ones they didn't think I'd find. They show exactly who changed the numbers. It wasn't my dad, it was them. Gasps filled the courtroom. The prosecutor's hands trembled slightly as he pointed at the little girl. This is highly irregular. She shouldn't even be here. The judge raised his hand for silence. His voice was deep and unyielding. I will decide what is irregular, counselor. Sit down. For the first time since the trial began, the power dynamic shifted. The father, sitting silently beside his daughter, looked at her with eyes full of astonishment and pride. He hadn't known she had gone this far. He hadn't known she had been quietly digging, searching, preparing all to save him. The judge turned toward the little girl again. Child, how did you even obtain this? Her lips trembled, but she spoke with honesty. I watched, I listened, and when no one believed my dad, I decided to believe him myself. I looked where they didn't want me to look, and I found the truth. For a moment, the entire room was suspended in silence. The truth hung heavy in the air, undeniable and raw. Then the unthinkable happened. The prosecutor, red-faced and sweating, slammed his briefcase shut and barked, "This is a trick! If this is allowed, we'll lose everything. Do you understand?" Everything. He didn't realize his own words betrayed him. The crowd stirred. Reporters scribbled furiously. The girl's small shoulders straightened, and for the first time, she smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. The judge's gavel cracked against the bench, echoing like thunder. Enough! This court will recess for 1 hour. When we return, we will examine every piece of evidence presented by this child. And if it holds weight, then this case will not continue as it has. The father leaned down, whispering to his daughter with tears in his eyes. Sweetheart, I don't know how you did all this. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. You told me once that being a lawyer is about fighting for what's right. So I fought for you. The father's throat tightened. He reached for her hand and held it tight. Around them, whispers filled the courtroom, some doubtful, some in awe, some already sensing that something monumental had shifted, because for the first time, the truth had a voice, and it came from the smallest person in the room. And yet, this was only the beginning. What no one knew, not the father, not the judge, not even the brave little girl, was that the people she had exposed weren't about to let their secrets crumble so easily. A storm was still coming, and it would Test them like never before. The entire courtroom had fallen into a silence, so deep that even the ticking of the clock on the back wall felt loud. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the little girl who had dared to stand up, who had spoken with the bravery of a lion and the clarity of a lawyer. She wasn't just a child anymore in their eyes, she was the voice of truth. The judge, sitting high on his bench, slowly removed his glasses. His stern face softened for the first time since the trial had begun. "Young lady," he said gently, "you've spoken with more honesty and courage than many adults I've seen in this courtroom." The opposing lawyer, who had been smirking and dismissing her earlier, now shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The evidence he thought would win his case had been shaken by the innocent yet powerful words of a child. He tried to interrupt, but the judge raised a hand, silencing him immediately. Her father, sitting only a few feet away, had tears in his eyes. He wanted to stand, hug her, and tell her how proud he was, but he knew he had to wait. This was her moment. The judge leaned forward. "Tell me one thing, young lady," he said softly. "Why did you decide to speak today? Why did you take such a risk?" The little girl looked at him, her small hands gripping the edge of the witness stand. "Because my dad didn't deserve this," she said firmly. "Because sometimes adults forget what's fair and what's right. And if no one says the truth, then lies will win. I didn't want lies to win today." Those words struck like lightning through the entire courtroom. Even the jury, who had been skeptical at first, now sat straighter, their eyes softened, some even nodding. The judge sat back in his chair, thoughtful. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "In all my years as a judge, I've never seen something like this." The truth came from the smallest voice in this room, but it was the loudest of all. He turned his gaze toward the opposing lawyer and said with finality, "Case dismissed." The gavel slammed. The room erupted in whispers and gasps. The father's case, which seemed hopeless only hours ago, was suddenly turned around because of his daughter's courage. He rushed to her, knelt down, and hugged her tightly. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice breaking, but the little girl shook her head. "No, Dad, I just told the truth. You always tell me that truth is stronger than lies. I just remembered your words." The father kissed her forehead, his tears dropping onto her hair. Around them, people in the courtroom clapped softly. Even the judge gave a rare, approving smile before standing and leaving the bench. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, microphones pushing forward, asking, "How did you prepare your daughter? Did you know she would speak up today?" But the father just smiled and said, "No one trained her. No one told her what to say." That was her heart speaking. And sometimes a pure heart is the best lawyer you can have. The little girl, holding her father's hand, looked up at him and whispered, "See, Daddy? I told you I could help." And for the first time in weeks, he laughed, free, genuine, and full of relief. Moral of the story: truth doesn't always come from the loudest voice, the richest man, or the most powerful lawyer. Sometimes it comes from the pure innocence and courage of a child who simply refuses to let lies win. This story reminds us that honesty, courage, and love can overcome even the greatest injustice. Never underestimate the strength of speaking the truth. Even the smallest voice can change the course of everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories. And let us know in the comments what lesson you learned today. Your voice matters.